Welcome to Finding Faith in Fandoms. I'm Jacqueline Tetrault.
And I'm Amelia Smith.
And for the first time ever, we are coming to you from BevCam, that's Beverly Community Access Media in Beverly, Massachusetts, which means we're recording in a real studio for the first time. For me, it feels kind of like returning to my roots because I grew up here in Beverly. We met in college at Gordon. We just have a lot of connections to the North Shore, so it feels kind of fitting that we're plugging into some of the resources here. And since we're recording at BevCam, all episodes will be available on YouTube. Some people might be clicking on this podcast for the first time, so I thought maybe we could briefly reintroduce ourselves. We started a year and a half ago now, which is hard to believe.
I was trying to remember exactly how long it's been.
Yeah, I'd been working on it for a while before it actually launched in June of last year. And it's been a fantastic time. So on Finding Faith in Fandoms, the idea is my friends and I come together. Most of us are Christians who work in the arts in some way as writers or actors or directors. And we talk about our favorite stories, what spiritual themes we see, what biblical parallels we see, which is what we talk about already just in our normal conversations with each other. But I thought it would be fun to share some of those thoughts with other people. We've covered a ton of our favorite stories in just the first year. We've done a bunch of classic literature like Jane Eyre, fairy tales, Disney movies.
And Frozen was our very first episode or our first story that we covered. So this also feels like coming home in a way to be returning with Frozen 2.
Yes. When we did our episode on Frozen, I thought that we would cover the sequel in that episode as well, but then we realized that no, there's so much to unpack from each of them, and it really deserves its own episode. So Frozen 2 came out in 2019. Amelia, what was your first impression of the movie? What did you think of it?
Oh, wow. I had an interesting experience seeing Frozen 2 for the first time because in January of that year, I'd started working with a Princess Party company, and with the movie coming out, there was a lot of demand for Elsa and Anna. And so I actually got to spend a whole day portraying Anna at a movie theater where it was showing, not having seen the movie yet.
Oh, wow.
So we saw all of these kids coming out of the theater, and I was like trying to gauge from their reactions, like, what is this movie all about?
Okay.
And then at the end of the day, the girl who was playing Elsa and I, we finally went in and saw it, and I was really surprised. It felt very different in tone from the first movie. It's like, you can still tell it's the same world, but the subject matter is a lot more mature, I feel like. And I think a lot of the younger kids we saw coming out of the theater may not have gotten all the nuances of the story. Although they all loved Olaf. Olaf is everybody's favorite. Every child that we asked, like, what's your favorite part of the movie? I like Olaf's song. But it's a story that really reads well for older audiences, older kids or adults like us. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot of interesting real-life connections and interesting spiritual themes. No matter what your spiritual beliefs are, there's interesting questions that it raises about how we as humans interact with the world around us. I think it was a really interesting way for the story and the characters to mature along with the audiences. Because, you know, the kids who were seeing Frozen when it first came out were a little bit older. It was how long in between? 6 years? 6 years. So I thought it was neat that Disney allowed the characters and the story to grow up along with its audience.
Yeah, I think Frozen 2 was the last movie that my siblings and I saw together before the pandemic in 2020. We watched it, I think it was January, so a couple months after its release. I was really impressed with the storytelling. Sequels are hard to pull off. Like, how do you have continuity but also go into new territory? And it goes to some very dark places and very deep emotions. Not that the first movie didn't do that.
Frozen 2 spends more time in those dark and difficult emotions. Like, they do come up in the first Frozen movie, but it's quicker to move on from those. But Frozen 2 really lets you sit in some of those painful spots.
Yeah, and we see the main characters all together a lot, which is great. I love seeing those group dynamics. But then they also go through their individual tests. Anna, Elsa, Kristoff, and Olaf, they're all being tested in different ways. Their relationships are being tested. And They have to figure out what lengths they're willing to go to for the sake of their goals. So in Frozen, and in our episode, we talked about, and this is something you've written about as well in your Princess Passion project a few years ago, we talked about how in Frozen, Anna is a Christ figure, and Elsa seems to represent humanity or the human soul. But in Frozen 2, the dynamic kind of shifts, and you've written very well about how Elsa is a Christ figure, while Anna parallels the disciples, particularly St. Peter, in this installment.
Yeah, and that was neat, too, to see the dynamics between the two of them grow as they've come closer as sisters. They've had a chance to rebuild their relationship from the first movie, and it was interesting to see how both of them had kind of grown into new roles and responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. So between the release of the two movies, there had been a few short films which showed the main characters living together and learning how to be a family, because Anna and Elsa have to rediscover their dynamic after so many years of being separated within their household and being cut off from their community. Now the gates are open, they're finally rebuilding their friendship and then also figuring out how to govern and connect with their community, the Kingdom of Arendelle.
When I first saw those shorts, I didn't really think much of them. They seemed kind of silly. Well, Olaf's Frozen Adventure has a little bit more of a heartwarming Christmas tone to it toward the end. But when I saw Frozen 2, I realized that those shorts were really setting the stage for the character development that we would see in the second movie, because even underneath or amidst all of the silliness, there is a lot of character growth that happens for both Anna and Elsa. We see, like you said, the two of them rebuilding their relationship and working through some of the hurt that's come from all their years of being separated. So I was glad that they showed that they actually had to deal with that. Like, their relationship wasn't instantly great, or those years of being separated weren't just erased when they came back together. And they also show Anna becoming more mature and responsible. She goes from, in the first movie, being very dependent on other people to help her and make things happen for her, because she hasn't had a lot of experience outside of her home and her family. And we see her moving in those shorts to being the one who's caring for Elsa and for others.
Yeah, in Frozen Fever, that takes place on Anna's birthday, and Elsa kind of wants to make up for all the birthdays that they didn't spend together, but then Elsa is getting sick and ignoring her own health while trying to make the days so perfect for Anna. And at the end, Anna finally convinces her, stop, you need to be in bed, let me take care of you. And Anna says the best gift is when Elsa lets her take care of her. When I rewatched that, I thought that was interesting, because it frames service as a gift for the giver as well as the receiver. And thinking in terms of Anna as a Christ figure, we also need to let God take care of us and not always just be rushing around trying to do things for him.
Yeah, and it is, I think, a hard thing for a lot of us to learn to just receive that love and not be working so hard to prove that we deserve it, because that's not why Jesus loves us. He loves us just because.
Yeah. And then Olaf's Frozen Adventure is the Christmas one, and it confirms what Olaf symbolizes. He is the embodiment of Anna and Elsa's relationship, of the love that they have for each other. Over the years, every Christmas, Anna would give Elsa a card or a doll depicting a snowman. And so that was the reminder of their relationship. And that whole storyline is about them rediscovering traditions, both for their family and for their community, because they realize every other family has their own holiday traditions, but we don't. They think at first that they don't have one.
But they do.
Yeah, and then they try to invite everyone in the community to a party, which doesn't go so well because everyone has their own plans. But then at the end, Olaf actually brings the community together, because he's the one who went around seeking traditions, and then they all work together when he's lost and they have to find him. And then it does end with everyone coming together for an outdoor Christmas party.
And a new tradition is born.
Yes. So yeah, even the shorts are very sweet. So about 3 years pass between Frozen 1 and Frozen 2 in the chronology of the movies. That's not counting their prologues, which both take place while Anna and Elsa are children. It looks like they might take place on the same night, the night
I think
that...
that's heavily implied.
Yes.
Because Anna whispers when their father's trying to get them to bed. She's like, we're going to build a snowman in the ballroom later.
Yeah, so it may have been like their last night of playing with Elsa's ice powers and being together, them and their parents. I love that in this movie we finally get to see more of their parents and learn more about them, because they weren't even mentioned after the prologue and the first song of the first movie.
And a lot of Frozen 2 is about Anna and Elsa learning who their parents were and what that means for them, which I think goes along with the idea of the story maturing along with its audience. You know, when you're little kids, mom and dad are just sort of there. You don't really think about them having a life outside of their role as your parents. But then as you get a little older, you realize they have stories, they have names besides mom and dad, and they have histories that are now part of my history as well.
So for Frozen 2, the writers consulted the Sami people, the indigenous people in the region of Sapmi, which today includes parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. And it ties in with the original Hans Christian Andersen story, The Snow Queen. The main character in that story, Gerda, goes on a journey to the North Pole, and she's helped along the way by different people, and one of them is Sami. I think most translations refer to her as the Lapland woman. I read that some Sami don't like that term, think it's derogatory. Arendelle is a fictional Scandinavian country, and they were developing the story about equally fictitious indigenous people, the Northuldra. It feels sort of like they were trying to rectify some of the cultural depictions that they did in the first movie, because the opening song, Violi, that's in the style of Sami music called yoik, and Kristoff's signature outfit also looks like it could have been influenced by that culture. They use those elements without any consultation with actual Sami people. But for this movie, they did reach out, and a committee was formed of Sami artists, historians, and political leaders to make sure that the culture in the movie that's inspired by theirs was respectful and sensitive and just better informed. It sounds like they were very pleased with how Disney went about things this time.
For a story that centers around two different cultures learning to live together, I'm glad that Disney was actually trying to do that in real life.
Yeah. So in the prologue of this movie, Anna and Elsa learn that the relationship between Arendelle and the Northuldra people started out good. It seemed like they were forming an alliance. Their grandfather, King Runyard, I think is his name, built a dam as a gift for the Northuldra, but then something happened. A fight broke out. It's not shown much, but their father describes it as a brutal battle, but they don't know what caused it. And the result of the breaking of that relationship was enmity and separation. The forest where the Northuldra lived is cut off from the rest of the world, and the spirits of the elements of nature they're described as being asleep. So this fits my salvation story theory, which we talked a lot about that in our premiere episode and our Frozen episode, how you can see the story structure of the gospel reflected in different stories. There's relationship, separation, an attempt to repair the relationship, some sort of sacrifice, a symbolic or actual death, but then a resurrection and restoration at the end. So we see we're dealing with the break-in relationship, not just of two people, but of entire cultures, entire communities. Anna and Elsa hear this story from their father, but then their mother also passes on something to them. She sings them this lullaby, All Is Found, about a place called Autoholland, said to contain the memories of the past. There's a version of the song sung by Casey Musgraves that has an additional verse, and I feel like it kind of sums up the plot and the theme of the movie. Until the river's finally crossed, you'll never feel the solid ground. you had to get a little lost on your way to being found.
I think that does describe both the story and also sort of the salvation story structure that you were talking about. So much of the theme of the movie is fear of losing what you have, but then having to let go of all sorts of things, of relationships, of traditions, of stories that we've held on to about ourselves or our families or cultures, and having to let go of those things in order to find the truth and find reconciliation.
Yeah. And then on the characters' individual journeys as well, they have to take risks and go to great lengths and sometimes get lost on their way to find what it is they're looking for, or maybe not what they're looking for, but what they need.
Yeah. There is a lot of loss in this story. A lot of things get lost. A lot of people get lost in all kinds of ways. But in the end, just like Jesus promised, all that was lost is restored.
Jumping back to the present day, we see Arendelle seems to be thriving. It's 3 years since the first movie. Elsa is ruling as queen. We get a song, Some Things Never Change, that basically shows how the town is doing, how the main characters are doing. You see there's a lot of art and agriculture and business happening. The royal family is now living in harmony, which I've talked before about how in stories, especially fantasy and fairy tales, the relationships of the royal family determine the relationships or the dynamics of their country, their environment. This movie came out in November, and the timing seems very fitting because they seem to be having a celebration very similar to American Thanksgiving. It's harvest time, and they're having a celebration with kind of nationalistic tones. They say it's time to count their blessings. The lyrics say, they've always been the kingdom of plenty that stands for the good of the many. These are their country's ideals. It sounds very much like America's ideals, to be honest. And Elsa promises that the flag of Arendelle will always fly. Before and during this song, Anna says to Olaf he's apprehensive about the nature of change that he's observing. He's a few years old now and realizing how the seasons work, how time passes. And Anna says that she doesn't worry about the future. But later on, she shows that she kind of is. She's insecure about all of these relationships and all these blessings that she has now. She worries about Elsa. And meanwhile, Kristoff is trying to propose to Anna, and she keeps either not noticing or misunderstanding what he's saying. Instead of her old optimism in the first movie, she imagines the worst possibilities and tries to stop them.
Which honestly kind of makes sense. Anna was in a really good place when they were children. We see in the prologue for both movies, they seemed very happy. She has a great relationship with her sister. She's a princess, and she suddenly lost all of that and didn't really understand why. I can see where, having experienced that as a young child, now that she's back in this place where everything is very good and feels very safe and happy, why she'd be anxious about losing that. It makes sense that she wants to keep things the way they are, because when we're in a good place, we want to stay there. But that doesn't make for a very interesting story. So of course the writers can't let this, when we see everybody doing so well in like the second song of the movie, we're like, well, that's not going to last.
Yeah. It's good to count and cherish your blessings, but change is also inevitable. Everything in this world, in this life, is fleeting. And even as they're singing about how some things stay the same, things are changing all around them. Like,
a lot of very clever visual irony there as Anna's singing like an old stone wall that'll never fall. She's leading Olaf along the top of the stone wall that crumbles under his feet. And there's a lot of other things that they're like, some things it'll never change. It'll stay the same. And things are constantly flipping and changing around them.
Yeah. There's quite a bit of foreshadowing in that lyric, I think, is setting up some things later on. And almost every verse of that song references the wind, which is a common metaphor for change, but also an aspect of nature that becomes relevant to the plot very quickly. After this celebration, We see Anna and Elsa, Kristoff and Olaf are living together in the castle. But Elsa's been hearing a voice that no one else can hear and has some anxiety. She's doing well enough as the queen, but apparently doesn't feel totally settled, totally comfortable in the role. You see some sweet interactions between Anna and Elsa, like Anna kind of reassuring her, and they have their mother's scarf. It occurred to me, in Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, there's sometimes imagery of Mary, the mother of Jesus, wrapping her children in a mantle, symbolizing her comforting and protecting nature. The first really big number of the movie is Into the Unknown. From a narrative standpoint, it's really cool. It covers the call to adventure, the refusal of the adventure. Elsa's hearing a literal call, but it's also kind of like the idea of calling as a vocation. In the Christian life, God may call us to frightening and dangerous work, and sometimes he calls us to new adventures, even after we've found success, stability, whatever we thought we were meant to do, but then we're called to something new.
I feel like that's quite often how it works, actually. Once we find one adventure finishes and we're like just starting to settle in, it's like, okay, now it's time to continue the work. There's more to be done. There's always more that needs to be done. There are new groups of people that need to be reached.
In the song, Elsa talks about how she's already been on an adventure, and now she finally has all the people that she loves safe in one place, but she still feels called to something more. She talks about her powers and how she feels them growing, but she doesn't really have a way to use them beyond occasionally using them for entertainment for the people and decorating and things like that. I don't know if you watched the documentary series on Disney+.
I did.
Yeah.
I got to see part of it.
Jennifer Lee, one of the directors, said that while brainstorming for the movie, she wrote a journal from Elsa's perspective. She thought about what Elsa would think of ice formations in nature and how are they similar or different from what she can do, and the grandeur of the natural environment and wanting to connect with that more. Elsa feels like she's being called to something more than just her role. That's sort of like in our own lives. We're not meant to stay static. We all have abilities and callings, and we're meant to continue growing, adapting, and cultivating our gifts.
It's interesting that you mentioned Elsa wanting to connect with nature, because by the end of the song, that's exactly what she ends up doing.
Yeah. So my first viewing of the movie, I was very confused by a lot of the magic stuff going on. And some of it is ambiguous. But watching it again, it looks as though Elsa is interacting with the wind spirit. She makes some bursts of magic, like ice crystals or sparkles in the air, and then the wind forms them into shapes and shows a bunch of things that are revealed later on. And so it's kind of saying like, hey, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to seek out. Elsa follows it, interacts with this spirit, and then causes an awakening of a kind. She does something, I don't fully understand it, but she awakens the spirits of the enchanted forest.
It is very interesting that the first spirit that she interacts with there, and the one that is sort of a constant presence throughout her journey, is the wind. Because in the Bible, the Holy Spirit is often described as a wind. People will hear God's voice in the wind. When the disciples receive the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, they hear a sound like a rushing wind. Yeah. And then they see the tongues of fire, which is the next spirit that Elsa encounters. So I think when I first saw the movie, I was like, this feels a little bit like not a Christian understanding of spirits and the natural world. But as I'm thinking about it more, I'm like, it actually does kind of line up with the ways that we describe the Spirit of God moving in the world.
Yeah. So when the spirits wake up, it kind of causes a crisis in the kingdom. You see the four elements, water, fire, earth, and air, kind of wreaking havoc, and the people of Arendelle have to flee.
They evacuate the capital, which ends up being a very providential thing that they do later on.
Yes. And they talk to the rock trolls and their leader, Grandpappy. He has some sort of clairvoyance. He says there's a wrong from the past that demands to be righted. The past is not what it seems, and they have to discover it, or Arendelle will have no future.
And so we go into the unknown.
Yes. So we have already a couple prominent themes in the story. Like, you have to understand the past in order to shape the future. And when you can't see where you're going, all you can do is the next right thing. Elsa decides to follow the voice, and Anna insists on coming with her, and Kristoff and Olaf and Sven do too. They eventually do find the enchanted forest. It's covered with a mist, and they're blocked from entering until Elsa touches it. It opens up for her. And the forest is beautiful, but they also encounter the spirits. The wind tosses them around in a cyclone. And then Olaf has his little song, When I Am Older. He's very humble and trusting, like a child. He doesn't understand what's going on, but he believes that grown-ups know everything and understand everything. The irony is that, no, actually, a lot of life does not make sense, even when you're an adult.
Yeah.
But there is a kind of wisdom in acknowledging when you don't understand something and hoping to understand in the future. As Christians, we face the world with a kind of resignation to the fact that we can't understand everything going on, but we do believe that God has a plan and a will, and that someday, not in this life probably, but in the next, we'll understand what was actually going on.
I think for a lot of people who are starting to come into maturity in their faith but aren't quite there yet, like Olaf, there's a sense that maybe if I just learn a little more and if I understand a little better, then this will all make sense to me. I just need to keep praying. I just need to keep searching the scriptures, and soon I will have all the answers and I'll understand what this all means. But real spiritual maturity is understanding that you're never going to have all the answers. Like you said, there are some things that only make sense when the time comes for God to reveal them to us. For some things, that time won't come in our lifetime. We just have to trust that God has a plan that's bigger and more complicated than we can understand right now. But even though we don't understand everything that's going on, there is thankfully someone a lot wiser than us who is in control, who is working to make things right, even when they seem to be going very wrong. Speaking of things going wrong, they also meet in this forest. They meet the Northuldra and a bunch of soldiers from Arendelle who have been stranded in the woods for several decades.
Yes. So there are still Arendellian soldiers who actually served their father and grandfather. One of them, Lieutenant Matthias, was actually Agnar's personal guard. And they're immediately loyal to Elsa because she's the queen now of Arendelle. But the Northuldra are very wary of them until they make a discovery. Elsa's magic reveals some moments in time, including the moment when their father was rescued by someone, and he doesn't know who. He was unconscious at the time, but it turns out that on the day of that battle, Aduna, a Northuldra girl, rescued him and then stowed away and went back to Arendelle. So Anna and Elsa discover their mother was Northuldra. They also have a connection with that culture, that community. So their relationship already begins to heal when they discover that Aduna saved her enemy when their people were fighting and killing each other. That's an incredible thing to do.
Yeah. But the situation continues to have lasting repercussions for both of their people groups. Like, both the Northuldra and the soldiers from Arendelle have been stuck in this forest for several decades.
Yeah.
And it's caused a lot of problems for both of them. So Anna and Elsa understand that they have this responsibility because they are connected to and descended from both of these groups of people. They're the only ones who can really bring healing and restoration to this relationship and this situation.
Kind of like how Jesus was both God and man.
Yeah.
There had to be someone who was both in order to reconcile that relationship. Elsa and Anna have to learn about both of their parents' peoples and figure out how to serve the best interests of both. Anna has a conversation with Matthias. He gives sort of the thesis statement of the story. Just when you think you've found your way, life will throw you onto a new path. And when it does, don't give up. Take it one step at a time and do the next right thing. So there's a bit of wandering and some separation of the core group. Anna and Olaf accompany Elsa while she goes to follow the voice. But Kristoff is left behind because he was trying to plan this grand proposal for Anna. And they decide to give Kristoff a song, Lost in the Woods.
I'm glad that they did that. It's such a silly song. It's hilarious. But also, like they said in the documentary series, it's an important moment for Kristoff to express his feelings, which is something that he seems to struggle with in the first movie.
Yes.
And they really wanted there to be a moment for the boys in the audience to see that it's okay to have big feelings and to talk about them, even sing about them. You are allowed to have emotions and express emotions too.
Yeah. So it's basically an homage to 1980s music videos, which younger audience members wouldn't get, but
the
older
parents
ones
do.
will. Like references to Queen and just the style and tone. And you pointed out that Kristoff's situation is sort of like how one person's choice to follow God can impact other people in their lives.
Yeah. Despite the sort of silly style of the song, it is a very heartfelt and very real emotion that's being expressed. And I think it's something that a lot of people experience when someone in their life is called to follow God in a way that disrupts the way their life has been going. You know, whether someone is called to ministry or the mission field or called to take on some really big project, that becomes not just their calling, but something that the people in their lives, their spouses or partners or children, are often called along with them. And that can be a real struggle when you're not the one who is directly hearing this call from God. Like, it's not necessarily your calling, but suddenly you're moving to a different city, or you're giving up the very stable, secure life that you had, or your person that's very important to you is suddenly spending a lot of time traveling or doing work with other people, doing ministry away from their family and their close circle. It's good and important to support that work, but it can also be stressful and draining for the people that have close relationships with this person. There's often tension there, and so I'm glad that the movie acknowledges that. They show Kristoff supporting Anna so wholeheartedly in everything that she's doing to support Elsa. And then on her own, when she takes initiative later, Kristoff has this fantastic line where he, sees her running through the forest trying to save the day, and he scoops her up onto Sven and he goes, "I'm here. What do you need?" That sums up their relationship so well. He's such a wholehearted supporter of Anna. But he also has his own emotions, and it's not always easy for him to be supporting her when her calling is taking her away from him.
Yeah. The song could be seen as giving into self-pity, but I think he moves past that. He acknowledges his emotions and he vents them in a healthy way, like talking to Sven and singing about it.
One could argue whether talking to a reindeer is the healthiest emotional coping mechanism, but
Reindeers
it
are
does
better
work.
than people.
Fair.
But yeah, it ends with him resolving to wait and to be available when Anna needs him. Anna and Elsa do make a discovery. They find their parents' ship. They discover more details about how they died and what they were doing on that voyage. They were looking for Otto Holland in the hope of finding out more about Elsa's powers. And Elsa is sort of falling back into her old mindset of blaming herself for her family's problems. She momentarily relapses into self-blame. she thinks that she's the reason her parents died, because they were trying to find out more about her. But Anna argues that actually, no, Elsa and her powers are a gift, possibly a reward for Iduna's selfless action of saving Agnar, her enemy. And Elsa, she's also learned that there is a legend among the Northuldra of a fifth spirit, not just water, earth, fire, air, but also a sort of bridge between the magic of nature and people. So Elsa is starting to think that these mysteries are kind of intertwined.
And that is a very Christ-like idea, like one human person who is able to gain mastery over nature and help humans to live in harmony with nature and in balance.
Elsa kind of, well, she literally pushes Anna and Olaf away. She sends them down in like an ice canoe. She says she has to venture into the dark sea.
And after seeing what it did to her parents, even with Anna's encouragement that she's not to blame, she still doesn't want to see the people she loves get hurt.
Yeah, so you can understand her actions, even though it is like in the first movie where she pushes away the people that want to help her. But she is trying to protect Anna, and it's not a clear-cut case of this person is right or wrong to want this or to do this. They just have different priorities. And like St. Peter in the Gospels, Anna does not want Elsa to put herself in danger, and she wants to follow her when she does. There's even the line, like, if you don't want me to follow you into fire, don't run into fire.
Yes, which sounds so much like something Peter would say. And he would definitely be the one to follow Jesus into fire if that had happened.
Yeah, so Anna wants to follow wherever Elsa goes, but there comes a point where she says she has to go alone. That comes up in the Gospels. Jesus says multiple times, like, where I am going, you cannot follow at a certain point in his journey. And Elsa realizes she has to go out into the deep, to quote Luke 5:4, and she has to go across the dark sea and into Atoholland to find the answers about herself and about the past. And we see Elsa subdue each of the nature spirits at different times. They recognize her as a sort of master or guardian. At first they may lash out and attack her, but then she's able to tame or befriend them.
And the scene of her doing that with the water spirit is very interesting.
Yeah.
I remember seeing some not quite serious comments from some jokes when the original Frozen 2 trailers came out from non-Christian friends being like, oh, is Elsa Jesus now? She's walking on the water? And then the movie came out and I was like, joke's on you. You were right.
Yeah. While researching the movie, I found out the water spirit that is shaped like a horse, it's called a knock, which is from Scandinavian folklore. It's a shape-shifting water spirit that would lure travelers into the water only to drag them down and drown them. But Elsa tames it and is able to ride it across the water. So, like Jesus, Elsa both walks on water and calms the sea. So she finally makes it to Atoholland, which it turns out is a glacier.
Which I just realized is why she has ice powers specifically, because they come from this spirit that lives within a glacier, a frozen river, which I think she knew Atoholland was a river, but she didn't realize it was frozen. When she sees it, she recognizes the connection with her own powers and feels like this is where I'm meant to be.
Yeah. That leads into show yourself.
I can't believe this song almost didn't make it into the movie. I was watching the documentary series and they talked so much about how hard it was for them to figure out exactly what was happening in the song and how much they had to try over and over to get it right. Yeah. And they considered cutting it so many times. I'm so glad they didn't, because it becomes the climax and the hinge point of the whole story.
Yeah, and particularly of Elsa's arc across the two movies. She reached the place of self-acceptance in the first movie, but now she's realizing her potential and her purpose. In terms of the heroine's journey, this sequence is the descent to the goddess and healing the mother-daughter split, because she discovers that the voice that she heard was actually her mother's voice. There are different fan theories and interpretations of how the magic works, but it seems like maybe Atahan was calling Elsa by using her memory of her mother and the lullaby, a voice that she would recognize and associate with goodness and safety and love. There's a lot happening in the song, and it's confusing. I had to watch it a few times. And apparently the creative team was also confused about, like, wait, is Elsa talking about power in herself or power from somewhere else? Is she talking to her mother or to herself or to the magic spirits? I think looking at Elsa as a Christ figure, it might be sort of similar to confusion about the concept of the Trinity, like one God but in three persons. And it's like, how does that work? And it's like, we can't really explain it.
Yeah,
fully.
and it's never fully explained in the movie, but I actually think this is the closest I've seen to a good depiction of the Trinity in any sort of media. You've got the spirit on the wind, the voice that is constantly present. You've got Elsa, the human figure who is also connected to the supernatural. She is human and she is spirit. And then you've got the mother, the parental figure, who is the one giving her this calling. And all three of them are interacting with each other at the same time, but they are also all the fifth spirit somehow. And it's very mysterious. It's very strange, but this actually could be a helpful way to talk with kids about the Trinity. When questions come up, you're like, well, you remember that scene in Frozen where Elsa's talking to her mother and she's hearing the voice singing to her and she's like getting her new dress, like she's singing in the cave. Which one is the fifth spirit? They're all the fifth spirit. Like, that's kind of how God works.
Yeah.
Maybe not on the first watch of this movie, but on like the second or third listen through of the song, I realized that this moment, I think, is very similar to Jesus' baptism and going into the wilderness after that to spend time with God. Because Elsa recognizes that she's had this feeling that she is different, that she is being called to something greater, but she doesn't quite understand what it is. And she needs to leave everyone else to go into nature, into the wilderness, and connect with this spirit. And she goes into that place and she finds a new understanding. Suddenly the pieces fall into place and she understands, this is who I am. This is how I'm connected to this spirit that I've been listening to, this power that I've been wanting to be able to make things right is me. First of all, when she comes into the cave and she finds herself face to face with her mother, who she lost, I started crying when I first saw that in 2019, several months before Frozen came out. So in January of that year, I'd actually lost my mother. And when Elsa came into the cave and that was who she saw, Elsa starts crying, I started crying. But that is such a beautiful moment. Whether it is literally her mother's spirit that's speaking to her, or whether it's the fifth spirit or Atahalan, it's beautiful. And I think that is what happens when we come face to face with God. We find that love and that unconditional acceptance and approval of a parent. And that's what we see happening in the Gospels when Jesus is baptized. He comes up out of the water and there's a voice from heaven. The Holy Spirit descends on him in the form of a dove. And so we have the three persons of the Trinity interacting in that moment. We have Jesus coming up out of the water, we have the Holy Spirit descending, and the voice of the Father saying, "This is my beloved Son," or "You are my beloved Son. With you I am well pleased." That was immediately what I thought of when I heard this song and saw that it was Elsa's mother singing to her. And she says, "You are the one you've been waiting for all of your life." I've heard some Christians criticize that lyric. What is this saying? Like, we are our own saviors, like we don't need to rely on God. The whole truth of the gospel is that we can't save ourselves. We need God to save us. And I'm like, yes, wholeheartedly. But if you're looking at this song thinking of Elsa as a Christ figure, then that line makes perfect sense. And it made me think of something that I hadn't really considered up until this movie came out, which was the fact that Jesus grew up, like his parents knew that he was the Messiah, but he also grew up in a community and a culture that was waiting and longing for the Savior to come and to make things right. Mm-hmm. And he would have grown up hearing people pray for God to send the Messiah. He would have grown up seeing the ways that living in a world that was not yet made right impacted people in all kinds of ways. I hadn't really thought about Jesus experiencing what it was like to be one of those people waiting for a Savior. And then in that moment, when he's baptized and is finally old enough to understand this is who I am, when he goes into the wilderness to talk with God about, okay, what does this actually mean? What is this going to look like? How am I going to save all of these people? How am I going to redeem all of creation? That must have been a really beautiful and amazing moment for Jesus to realize, because we all know what it's like to be living in this place of longing for things to be made right, and how amazing it would be to realize that I actually have the power to do that. I actually can put an end to all of this suffering. I actually can make peace and right all of these centuries of wrongs. And that was just something I hadn't really thought of before this movie came out, that Jesus knows what it's like to live with that longing and was the one to fulfill it. And I thought that was really cool.
That's so beautiful. Well said.
Thank you.
The musical you introduced me to, his story, has a great song about the 40 days in the desert and Jesus taking that time both to dialogue with the Father and to understand and accept his mission. And there's evidence in the Gospels, like Luke mentions that Jesus grew in wisdom. I think you mentioned this also in your writing. Full knowledge of the mission of the Messiah would have been a terrible burden for a child to carry. So it would make sense if Jesus had come to understand it gradually for the many years that he lived before starting his ministry.
Yeah, and I think, just like all of us grow into understanding who God is at different points in our life, I think Jesus also grew in his understanding of God and of himself as God.
Yes.
That would definitely be something to grow into.
Yeah. It's similar to the transfiguration as well. Jesus' baptism and transfiguration are both moments when the Trinity is manifested in a very special way, and they affirm Jesus' identity, purpose, and belovedness. And that's what Elsa experiences in Show Yourself. But then that sequence for her also becomes kind of like the harrowing of hell, because she has to go deep into Atonement to learn the truth about what happened with King Runyard and the Northuldra people. She discovers that her grandfather lied to and betrayed the Northuldra. The dam that he built for them was actually meant to weaken their land and their waters, not to strengthen them. And then when the Northuldra leader wanted to talk with him about it, Runyard killed the Northuldra leader in cold blood, and that's what started the battle that day. So Elsa has this discovery that her ancestor was the one who sinned, and in discovering that, she goes so deep into Tahalan that she freezes.
And it starts just like Anna in the first Frozen movie, when she starts to freeze, and Elsa recognizes immediately this is what's happening.
Before she freezes fully, she's able to send a blast of her magic to Anna and Olaf, who at this point are trapped in some caves trying to find their way out. She's able to transmit kind of the memory of that event so that Anna at least can learn the truth of what happened. But then Elsa remains stuck in this place that's kind of like the underworld now. So Elsa sacrifices herself, essentially, to uncover the truth. And then it falls onto Anna to reckon with that information. And Olaf also realizes, they talk about how what King Runyard did goes against everything that Arendelle stands for. which also sounds kind of like how we talk about here in the United States, certain presidents or founding fathers who participated in injustices or committed atrocities that now we feel shame for and realize that goes against all the ideals that we stand for, that we thought that they stood for, maybe that they even fought for in wars. But then the descendants are left to reckon with that. Anna realizes the thing that they have to do to set things right is to destroy the dam, which would then cause Arendelle to flood. So
thank goodness they evacuated.
yes, the kingdom would actually be destroyed, but the people would be safe, which seems like a mercy from the spirits or from Atahalan. Anna's coming to this realization, and then Olaf, poor Olaf, starts to disintegrate. It's like in that old Christmas special about Frosty the Snowman. I remember being heartbroken when Frosty melts.
Yeah.
Since Elsa technically is dead at this point, she's frozen, so the magic that brought Olaf to life and has held him together all this time is no longer intact, and so he starts to dissipate into snowflakes. He tells Anna, "You're gonna have to do this next part on your own." And this is Anna's lowest point. His death indicates that Elsa has also died, so she realizes her sister, the person that she has loved all her life and looked up to and followed, in some ways her life kind of revolves around Elsa, and now Elsa is gone. One thing we learned from the Frozen documentary series, Into the Unknown, is that one of the directors, Chris Buck, lost his son. His name was Ryder. Ryder Buck died in a car accident around the very time that Frozen, the first movie, was wrapping. And they actually named one of the minor characters in Frozen 2 after him. But so the director and the creative team are very intimately familiar with the experience of grief. So Anna has this song, The Next Right Thing. The song kind of covers all the stages of grief. And like the disciples on Good Friday and Holy Saturday, Anna has lost the person that she loved and believed in the most, and then has to contemplate, how do I move forward now?
Yeah. I love that this song was included in the movie. Mm-hmm. I love that they took the time to stay in that space of grief and acknowledge everything that happens there, because that's so often something that we want to rush through as people. And I think Christians especially tend to want to rush through grief. Like when someone dies, we go, oh, we'll see them in heaven. God has a plan. They're in a better place now, all that. And like, yes, okay, all these things are true, but we still need to take the time to grieve. Believing that those things are true doesn't make the grief disappear. Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned earlier, I lost my mom pretty suddenly in January of 2019. The first part of that year was just kind of a blur for me. I honestly don't remember a lot of what happened in the first 6 months of 2019. But by the time Frozen 2 came out, I was starting to come out of that. I was starting to find my footing again. And then, saw the movie and heard this song. And I thought, oh, somebody finally gets it. Somebody finally put into words everything that I had been feeling and wanting to say for the last year. The song became sort of an anthem for me for that year and the year that followed, because 2020 was also a very dark year, and what can we do? We can't change what happened. We can't make this grief suddenly go away, but we can do the next right thing, even when it hurts, and even in that place of pain, we do the next right thing. I also love that it acknowledges the weight and the pain of that type of loss.
Yeah. Cinema Therapy, in their episode on Anna, they talk about this whole emotional beat, and sometimes the next right thing is as simple as just getting out of bed in the morning, just like, okay, what's the next thing I have to do? I have to take a shower. I have to eat a meal. Looking at the enormity of how do I get through this day may be too much, but just focus on, okay, what's the next thing I need to do? And Anna, similarly, she can't think about all the implications of a life without her sister, but she can focus on the next thing that she has to do, which is to make things right for the North Uldra and the people of Arendelle. It also sounds kind of like some songs or prayers that also describe walking by faith and not being able to see where we're going, but we know which way God is calling us. John Henry Newman wrote a hymn called Lead Kindly Light, and there's a lyric that goes, "Keep firm my feet, I do not ask to see the distant scene, one step enough for me."
Which is very biblically rooted. There's, thy word is a lamp unto my feet. Somebody I once heard point out that the type of lamps that they would have used in the Bible do not give off a lot of light. They only give off enough light for 2 or maybe 3 steps ahead. So, yeah, we don't always, God's light doesn't always show us the full path, but it shows us just enough to take the next step forward.
Yeah. Anna's arc in this movie is about the fear of losing what she loves most. She has to let go of Elsa and give up her kingdom. But this is also the moment of eucatastrophe, the term coined by J.R.R. Tolkien, the reversal where it seems like everything has gone wrong, but then everything suddenly turns out right.
Well, that's the whole theme of the movie, isn't it? When all is lost, then all is found.
Yes, yes. It works in the same way in the salvation story theory. The moment when Jesus dies and is gone actually turns out to be what saves humanity, and he comes back. Anna and Elsa, they give up everything for their kingdom, but then they ultimately receive back everything that they gave up. When the dam is destroyed, Elsa unfreezes, she's freed, and then she's able to travel on the Knock, the horse, back to Arendelle and uses her magic to create a wall and block the floodwaters from impacting Arendelle. There's so much to unpack from the whole sequence.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful picture of, again, sort of a sped up version of what Jesus did, because she goes from death to shielding the whole, her kingdom and the ones who have done the most harm in this situation. She shields them from being destroyed by the consequences of their ancestors' sin. And it's such a beautiful depiction, I think, of what Jesus did for us, because he saw that the consequences of humanity's sin from generations and generations past would result in our destruction. And so what does he do? He puts himself in the way. He says, I will take on the consequences here, because he's the only one who can. And just like, you know, if Anna tried to go out there and stand in the middle of the fjord, she would just get swept away because she doesn't have the power to deliver them from this. But Elsa, she has these ice powers, and she is able to protect. She is able to stand against this tidal wave that's created. She's able to stand between her kingdom and the consequences of their ancestors' sins and protect them, because she has the power and the strength to withstand the wave of destruction and stop it from destroying them.
It's so cool. And Anna and Elsa are both uniquely positioned because they are the children of both the North Uldra and Arendelle. Just like Jesus had to be fully God and fully human, because only someone like that would be able to atone for the sins of humanity, but also be able to not be destroyed by that. So everything that Anna and Elsa gave up is restored. That's also a recurring theme in the Bible, in the Gospels. We are called, if not to give up everything, at least to be willing to give up everything, even family, in order to follow Jesus. Jesus talks about that at several places in the Gospels. Like, you need to be willing to leave everything behind, but then you will receive so much more in return.
Also in Matthew 16, verse 25, he says, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. I had always thought of that in terms of a literal loss of life, because that was the reality for, and has been the reality for, a lot of Christians for centuries, from Jesus' disciples and earliest followers up until the present day. And yet we have this promise of eternal life with Jesus that makes that sacrifice worthwhile. But it also, I think, could refer to losing our way of life, losing, like Anna in the movie, the life that we've felt safe and comfortable in, whether that's relationships or a place that we've considered home or status, losing that for the sake of following God and for the sake of doing justice allows us to step into the life that God wants to give us, which is always so much better to be living in that truth and that flourishing, that abundant life, which often requires us to let go of the life that we had.
Yeah. The timing of this movie coming out around Thanksgiving, which commemorates a particular interaction between colonizers and an indigenous people group. I don't think we can get too much into the real world parallels, but it's hard to ignore the ways that Arendelle and the United States and other nations are similar, and how interactions between different cultural groups can go very wrong, and then the consequences of oppression and the question of, well, now we know it's wrong, but how do we make it right? Well, in some ways you can't, but there still needs to be efforts to acknowledge and make restitution where possible. The United States is still reckoning with the dark parts of our past as a country, coming to terms with the fact that so many people from our history that maybe we previously held up as heroes also committed horrible actions against different groups that they perceived as a threat, whether they were indigenous people or immigrants from other countries with different cultures than theirs. I'm not saying we can look to this movie for guidance in policy or anything like that, but these characters could be looked at as examples, because Anna and Elsa are willing to uncover the truth and then work toward healing between these two communities.
Yeah. And they're willing to give up the things that they had. First of all, they're willing to give up the story that they have been told about their own people's history.
Some of that national pride that is seen in the beginning.
I think that actually continues the theme that we saw established in the first Frozen movie, that true love is sacrifice. True love is putting someone else's needs before yours. And this movie takes what happened in Frozen 1 on an individual level and expands it to, what does it look like to do that on a community or a national level? We have Anna and Elsa choosing to put the needs of the North Uldra before their own families and their own communities. They see, we are part of both of these people groups. We are responsible to both of these people groups. And one group right now is suffering, so we're going to put their needs before ours and choose to love this group, even if it means sacrificing some of the things that we love. I think as Christians, that's something that we are called to do. We're called to love sacrificially on an individual level and on a wider community level. We're called to follow Jesus' example in giving up power and privilege in order to bring reconciliation and justice and healing. And that can feel really scary sometimes. But what I think this movie reminds us is that we don't need to be afraid of what will happen if we give up our power to love others, because Jesus has already done that for us. Jesus has borne the consequences of our sin, just like Elsa did for Arendelle. So we don't have to be afraid of being destroyed when we make these sacrifices, because Jesus has already shown that he doesn't want to wipe us off the face of the earth just because our ancestors have done wrong. We can approach those situations with a spirit of sacrifice and with a spirit of humility and love, working toward reconciliation together, because God's goal isn't destruction for any group. God's goal, Jesus has shown us, is for us all to be reconciled, for us all to be able to share in this healed community together. I think that's something that's important for us to remember, that yes, some things may need to change, some things may look different, and some may need to be destroyed, like some systems that we've built or some practices that we've had that are harming others. But we ourselves are not going to be destroyed by doing justice and seeking healing and reconciliation.
Yeah. At the end, after Elsa has saved Arendelle, she comes back, she finds Anna, and the two of them are reunited on a beach, which you pointed out was like Jesus and Peter in the Gospel of John after the resurrection. And then Elsa reveals her identity, that she's discovered as the fifth spirit. And Elsa announces that she actually isn't coming back to Arendelle. She gives the title and role of queen to Anna, which I thought of this first, and I wasn't sure if it was too Catholic of me thinking, oh, like Jesus giving the keys to St. Peter, but then you also had a similar thought. Jesus does give Peter some very specific instructions. He tells him, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. Elsa is staying with the Northuldra. They're now freed from the enchanted forest. They're able to see the full sky. The soldiers from Arendelle can return there, and they can travel freely. But Elsa realizes her place is there among the spirits and the people who coexist with them. And Anna can take on the responsibility for the kingdom where they grew up. You see this in a lot of biblical and mythological stories where the young child becomes the ruler instead of the firstborn. In Greek mythology, that's the case with Zeus. He's the youngest of his brothers, but he's the one who becomes the king of the gods. The story of Jacob and Esau in the Old Testament, the younger son is given the birthright instead of the older.
And then Jacob continues that pattern with his grandsons as well, giving the younger of Joseph's two sons the firstborn's blessing. It was interesting that you pointed that out. I wonder what the reason for that pattern is, and I'm not sure, but it did occur to me that in the context of the Bible, it could be pointing us to think about what Jesus said about many who are first shall be last, and many who are last shall be first. And in God's kingdom, the power structures often do not look the way we would expect them to in our world. It's not about who is firstborn or who is wealthiest or most educated or who has the most status from a worldly standpoint. It is the person who is willing to serve and to care for others well and to love them well who is given the responsibility. And I love that we see that responsibility being conferred from Elsa to Anna at the end of the movie, because that is, again, echoing Elsa's role as a Christ figure. She makes this sacrifice, she saves the kingdom, she reunites the people, and then she has other work to do in this spiritual realm, but she's not going to abandon her kingdom. She confers the care and the protection of this group of people, her kingdom, to someone who's been following her and learning from her and caring for her this whole time, just like Jesus did with Peter. And I think all of Jesus' followers share that responsibility and continue to, but there are some very specific instructions given to Peter. And it makes sense for someone who was such a natural-born leader and showed that willingness to take initiative and to be useful. Jesus honors that and says, yeah, you want responsibility? Have it. Take it, because I know that you'll do well with it. Yeah. Elsa and Anna both take on leadership roles, and
it means that their relationship is going to look different. They're not living together anymore. They're living in different places, but they maintain contact. I think that's kind of similar to people who are called to different types of ministry or different mission fields. And sometimes God's call may take you away from the people you love for a time, but we are still connected. We're still both parts of the body of Christ, and we still communicate and pray for each other and try to create opportunities to be together and visit.
Oh, and even though Jesus is no longer physically present with us, his followers still maintained that connection with him and still do through prayer and through the Holy Spirit. One of the last things we see in the movie is the wind spirit carrying a message from Anna to Elsa.
Yes.
So the Holy Spirit continues to maintain that connection.
Yeah. It ends with, I don't know if it's Anna's actual coronation day. I think probably not, because I'm sure Elsa would have been there
for that.
But they unveil a statue of Agnar and Iduna and commemorate their love for each other and the new unity between their peoples. And yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Elsa has come into her own and is happy in her role and at one with nature, but also still connected with her sister. It's just a beautiful story for them as individuals and for the whole environment and community that they're a part of.
Yeah. Well, like the song says, all is found.
Yes. And that's basically how the gospel works too. It seems like everything is lost, and in a sense, everything is lost, but then everything is found in the end. We're recording this in early November, so if you're looking for something to watch around Thanksgiving, give Frozen to another look. You can watch it with your family, and it's a safe enough topic, I think, that you can talk about it at the table. It's a lot of fun, and it's just beautiful.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Amelia, for taking the time to talk about this. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and insights.
Well, thank you for inviting me to venture into the unknown with you.
Thank you, viewers, for watching or listening. I'm really excited about this new collaboration with BevCam. You can find more content like this on findingfaithinfandoms.org. We have a Patreon and Ko-fi page set up if you want to support us. And please keep us in your prayers. Thanks for being part of the fandom. God bless.